To summarize a complex situation, in May 1940, after Germany's successful invasion of Poland in September 1939, Germany launched an ambitious blitzkrieg that stormed through the Netherlands, followed quickly by Belgium, then finally into France. Instead of pushing through the heavy militarized Maginot Line on the French-German border, the Germans invaded France from the north. The speed, efficiency, and power of the German attack from the north took the French by surprise, and they were unable to send troops to the Belgian border quickly enough and put up proper resistance. British troops cornered at Dunkirk near the Belgian-French border were forced to make an emergency evacuation across the English Channel back to Britain. On June 22, 1940, France surrendered, and the next day, Hitler posed in front of the Eiffel Tower. Another photo taken after the fall of France in 1940 was a photo often called the Weeping Frenchman. The photo was taken as German soldiers confiscated the French regimental flags, which had been moved to southern France to protect them from capture. The humiliation of France by their quick capitulation was a hard hit to its national dignity and pride, and this photo will always be a reminder of that dark period in its history. This photo captures the moment when the United States became directly involved in World War II. On December 7, 1941, Japanese planes made a planned surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, in an attempt to destroy the American Navy so they could capture its Pacific Island territories and those of its allies with ease. The attack lasted only 90 minutes. 18 ships, including 5 battleships, were destroyed, and 2,335 American military personnel were killed, and more than 1,000 wounded, and 68 civilians were also killed. Japan lost 55 airmen, 29 planes, and 9 submarines. At the same time as the Pearl Harbor attack, Japanese troops invaded the American-occupied Philippines and other military outposts on smaller islands. This caused the American government to declare war on Japan immediately. This photo was taken on April 19, 1943, showing Jews being removed from the Warsaw Ghetto in Poland. The ghetto was created in 1940 to effectively contain the area of Warsaw that Jews primarily occupied. Germany began deporting Jews from the ghetto to resettle the East, but when the Warsaw Jews found out that these deportations were really for extermination, the Jewish resistance groups in the ghetto revolted on April 19th. The resistance fighters refused to surrender, so the Germans set fire to the ghetto. 13,000 Jews were killed, about half from smoke inhalation, and the rest were sent to concentration camps or extermination camps. This photo of a Japanese officer executing Australian POW Leonard Sitfleet in Aitape in Papua New Guinea on October 24, 1943, shocked the Western Allies when it was first published in an Australian magazine the next year. The biggest reason why it's so important is because it's the only known photograph of a Western POW being beheaded by the Japanese. The photo itself was found on the body of a dead Japanese soldier in April 1944, months after the execution took place. This photo, together with others showing the executions of civilians and soldiers in Asia, documents the lesser-known atrocities committed by the Japanese in the Pacific during World War II. After a now-forgotten battle in Buna and Papua New Guinea, this photo was taken on December 31, 1942, and was later published in Life magazine in September 1943. The importance of this photo is that it was the first photo of dead American soldiers released to the public. After a long time of persistent persuasion from a Time correspondent, the photo was finally approved for publication by President Franklin Roosevelt himself. Though the photo would certainly not improve morale, it would bring the realistic horrors of war to home, reminding people that war was not without its costs. The Allied invasion of France was planned many months in advance. Europe needed to be taken under Allied control if they had any hope of defeating Germany. The first step, Allied commanders believed, was to take back France. American paratroopers were dropped behind enemy lines on June 6, 1944, in the middle of the night, hours before the invasion forces. Many landed off target and struggled to regroup with their unit. Because of these setbacks, the paratroopers' success took longer than expected. The combined Allied assault of infantry troops began in the early hours of daylight. This photo shows American infantry units landing on Omaha Beach, the most heavily defended area of the landings. The initial landings cost over 4,000 dead for the Allies alone. Germany suffered similar, possibly greater losses. This next photo, taken in October 1944, shows General Douglas MacArthur wading through the water, making his way to the Philippine shore. To the public, this signaled the beginning of the end for the Pacific War. After escaping from Corregidor 2 years earlier as the initial Japanese invasion closed in on the remaining American and Filipino troops, MacArthur's return to the Philippines was just as significant as General George Patton's promise to cross the Rhine into Germany. MacArthur, known for caring about his powerful image, is rumored to have staged the photo after the real landing, or to have chosen to wade through the water instead of getting off at the pier. One of the most iconic photos ever taken, this shows 6 American soldiers raising an American flag on top of Mount Suribachi on the Pacific island of Iwo Jima on February 23, 1945. The dormant volcano was the only vantage point on the island, so it was objective number 1. U.S. Marines hit the beaches on February 19th, suffering horrendous casualties, partly due to the thick ashy sand on the beaches, and partly due to a severe underestimation of Japanese troop numbers and the extent of their fortifications. More than 6,800 Americans were killed, and nearly 3 times as many Japanese were killed. However, overall American casualties of 26,000 exceeded the Japanese by a few thousand, the only time in the war when American casualties were higher than Japanese casualties. The photo, taken on the 4th day of the invasion, was seen by many at home as a victorious moment. However, the battle lasted for another month, and the bloody Battle of Okinawa loomed in the near future. By 1945, Germany was getting desperate. After massive losses in the Soviet Union and their eventual defeat by Allied forces who had penetrated back into German-occupied territory, defeat was almost inevitable. By this time, Germany had begun conscripting more and more younger soldiers from the Hitler Youth programs, as young as 15 and 16 years old. In this photo, 16-year-old Willy Hübner receives an Iron Cross medal from Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, for his bravery during a battle in March 1945. Hübner survived the war, but many others his same age were not so lucky. As like many photos in this video, this one needs little introduction. Whether people know any details or not, they know that this shows victims of the Holocaust in their cramped living area in a concentration camp. Some more details about this photo are that it was taken at the Buchenwald concentration camp upon its liberation in April 1945. Elie Wiesel, who had become famous for his memoir about his time as a prisoner during the Holocaust, is pictured on the second bunk, 7th man from the left. This blurry photograph is thought to be the last photo taken of Adolf Hitler on April 28th or 29th, 1945, only a day or two before his suicide. Not much is known about the photo except that it shows Hitler and an officer reviewing the damage above his Führer bunker. We can only imagine what his mind was going through, as he must have realized that his war and empire had failed and lay in ruins. This well-known photo shows Soviet soldiers raising the flag of the Soviet Union on the roof of the Reichstag building in Berlin on May 2, 1945, signaling the end of the Battle of Berlin and thus the defeat of Nazi Germany. But this was actually a restaging of the actual flag raising on April 30th. After the original flag was raised, the Soviets briefly lost control of the Reichstag, and the photo was taken once control had been regained. The photo was edited for publication by deleting one of the watches of the soldier below the one raising the flag, and more smoke was added in the background. Research for the creation of a nuclear weapon began as early as October 1941, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt approved the program. The top-secret Manhattan Project continued to develop the bombs in secrecy, in cooperation with the British and Canadian nuclear programs. After Germany was defeated in May 1945, following the sudden death of President Roosevelt, Japan continued to fight alone, with no sign of surrendering. Preparations to invade mainland Japan were made, with a shockingly high casualty estimation for both sides. The new president, Harry Truman, made the decision to use the nuclear bomb against Japan to force them to surrender unconditionally. On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., for the first time in history, a nuclear bomb was used in war. Between 70,000 and 80,000 people were killed as a direct result of the bomb, and an additional 70,000 were wounded. And countless more died later or suffered the effects of the nuclear radiation for the rest of their lives. 3 days later, another nuclear bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, resulting in the unconditional surrender of Japan. The world was then launched into the atomic age, and would never be the same again. Another iconic photo of the war really does depict the end of the war, VJ Day. When the surrender of Japan was initially announced, excited people took to the streets, and this photo was taken in a candid moment of excitement, which has made the participants difficult to identify, and various people have claimed to be the two. With the defeat of Germany a few months earlier, the war was really over.